52 Sketches, Episode 5, Rock Musician Arden Leigh.
Welcome to 52 Sketches, a podcast about creativity and creative practices. Here's your host, Rob Head.
Welcome to the 52 Sketches podcast. I am your host, Rob Head. We're here to talk about living a creative life, creativity, hacks and practices, habits, strategies for making wonderful things. Today, I'm so pleased to welcome Arden Leigh, a performing artist and facilitator living and working in Los Angeles. Arden Leigh is the creator and facilitator of the Repatterning Project, a course in understanding the human operating system and repatterning trauma imprints and social conditioning in order to achieve creative freedom. She is also the creator and frontwoman of indie pop rock project Arden and the Wolves. Little taste of Who Can You Trust by Arden and the Wolves. So, I love that track. It's so good. So welcome, Arden Leigh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. So it's so good to have you on the show. You know, I always like to start these interviews by going back to your backstory. You know, let's write the graphic novel backstory for you. And tell me a little bit about your creative upbringing. Did you sing, dance, draw, play an instrument, cook, act, write? You know, what were you involved in growing up?
Oh yeah, I was always a musical theater geek for sure. I grew up on Broadway musicals. Grew up thinking that I was going to go into acting and specifically go into musical theater. It was sort of my dream as a kid was to be on Broadway. And then I got to NYU and 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And
what timing?
Yeah, I know, right? And the face of theater really changed after that. So, there were fewer producers who were willing to take as many creative risks, and Broadway ended up looking a lot like Disney and a lot like Mamma Mia, and the things that I had really loved growing up. The really more sort of more psychologically intense musical theater, such as like Jason Robert Brown with like Songs for a New World. And, there were the two editions of The Wild Party that came out the same year, like interesting, creative, kind of dark and innovative stuff just kind of went by the wayside because people didn't want to take those creative risks anymore. So there I was, having graduated NYU and being like, I don't even really know if I want to audition for the things that are going up now. This is not what I envisioned for myself. And I think really that my relationship with theater when I was growing up was that theater was the one place when I was a child where I could really touch the sublime. I think that was my connection. And so I find that now. I find ways of meeting those needs that don't necessarily need to go through theater itself. But of course, when I was a child growing up, like that was, if you imagine it in like a Joseph Campbell kind of sense, between like the ordinary world and the mystical world, the world of the sublime.
Sure.
That
the
for
theater
me was
your
how
special world. Yeah,
that's how I accessed that. So thankfully now that I've gone insane and just lost my mind, I can access that whenever I want.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up 9/11 because I feel like we're in a sort of a parallel point in history right now where all the rules are changed in the pandemic, and it's sort of a new world. There are no shows right now. There's no no music shows, no theater, nothing.
Yeah,
and so we're in this unknown territory. How's that changed your approach?
Yeah, you know what? It hasn't really changed much at all for me. If anything,
Okay.
actually, I count myself incredibly lucky that actually, if anything, I have managed to find a lot of personal silver linings in this quarantine. And this has more to do with my work in the Repatterning Project, naturally. And there's a lot of us out there who have a bit of a more, spiritual or oracular kind of bent who have been feeling the fact that 2020 was going to be a really big and really transformative year. I don't think all of us knew exactly what it would look like.
I don't think anybody predicted this. Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. But we knew something big was coming. And the work that I've been doing on myself since 2016 and with other people since 2018 has absolutely led to, has been all the prep work to lead to this place. Essentially, the work that I do in the Repatterning Project is kind of like Marie Kondo for your mind-body system, right?
Yeah.
If you imagine that, all of us are born with these really brilliant human computers, and we're not given a user's manual as to how they work. And so we get frustrated thinking that we're running programs on them that we assume should be working in certain ways, but which actually aren't running in the ways that they're supposed to. And it's not our fault. It's just we've installed a faulty program, right? It's either a virus, or it's an app that's just taking up too much bandwidth and not actually doing what it's supposed to do. And that's the way that we look at our patterns, our beliefs, and our habits. And the mixed blessing, that's a really awfully optimistic, to the point of perhaps bypassing, and I don't subscribe to doing that, way of describing this, this tragedy that's happening to our country. But the one thing that it has done, is that it has shown us everywhere that we have systems in place that are not working. Our healthcare is obviously not working. Our preparation for something like this was obviously not working. Our education system, obviously not working. The wealth gap, right? Late capitalism itself. Again, we have Jeff Bezos, who's on track to be a trillionaire right now through his abuse and exploitation of his employees through, Amazon and Whole Foods and whatever else part of the world that he owns,
Right. My former
and
boss,
all of that is becoming, oh gosh, yeah. All right. Yeah. So we're just going right for the jugular on this one, right? We are burning all the bridges.
Yeah. we hung out in the cafeteria a couple times about 20 years ago.
Oh gosh. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting for you to frame things as programming and as like apps installed. My business partner Damien and I both are software developers in addition to being artists of various descriptions, and so this is sort of exactly the metaphor that resonates with us. So this type of work that you're doing now, I want to back up again for a moment and sort of fill in the gap between your sort of childhood and it sounded like maybe you went to NYU for undergrad. Did you how did you get from there to here? Did you have important moments, important mentors? How did that transition happen?
Oh yeah.
If it's a transition, in fact.
For sure. Well, yeah, there were several transitions. The way that I can best describe it is we go back to that place where, I've graduated NYU and I've invested now, a whole ton of time and energy into a theater degree, and then come out into a world that is no longer, I come out into a life where the kind of theater that is being produced is no longer sparking joy, shall we say. Okay. This is not what I had necessarily planned for, right? And I did a couple regional shows coming out of college, and I was lucky. I got to do some shows I really liked. I got to do I got to understudy Sally Bowles in Cabaret. Like, that was very cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But more and more I was just seeing the fact that I had signed up for this life where I thought I was going to be suffering for my art, but that it would be worth it, right? Where I was going to be like starving in a tiny apartment in New York, eating Campbell's.
But at least you'd be doing great work, Yeah.
Right, but it would be worth it, yeah. And that's what everyone told me growing up. Oh, you're gonna be a starving artist. You're gonna, and I heard and I internalized all those messages, which that'll be relevant later, naturally.
Okay.
Right, talking about internalizing programming and looking at the beliefs of what we believe is possible for ourselves. So from there, I was bartending. I was miserable. And I ended up through a series of strange events, which involved getting involved with a theater company in New York that produced the first play that I wrote. And like many theater groups, they were very LARPy and very kinky. There's a lot of crossover there, right? Okay. I'm sure that's not a far leap, right? Like, you're with me on that?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was that brand of theater people. And that was how I was introduced to the BDSM scene. And I ended up within a year I ended up applying for a job as a professional dominatrix.
Okay.
Because,
was this something that you would never have imagined, 3 years earlier, or?
Yeah, well, it's interesting looking back at it now, because certainly I would not have imagined that 3 years earlier, but it is certainly safe to say that I was very much a late bloomer. And when this world opened up to me, it was like all of a sudden I saw other possibilities for myself outside of my current ego constructs, that I had been that good girl. I'd gone to Catholic school. I was always a rule follower, like I was very much like a good girl kind of archetype. And in involving myself in this world and finding out that there were ways, ideally of playing safely and that things could be consensual and all this stuff. Although to be honest, I really had no grip on an understanding of informed consent at that point, because I didn't really have a lot of personal boundaries. But but basically, I got involved in that world.
So,
and from there,
from there to neuro-linguistic programming, of course.
yeah. Actually, it really was from there to neuro-linguistic programming, because hypnosis is also a fetish. And I met a dom who gave a training at our house, who was a hypnotist, who was a hypno-dom. So there we are. You're going to regret asking me my origin story, because there is a lot. I'm just warning you. I'm happy to talk about all of it, but
well, okay,
also I have autism, so
so
I absolutely don't know when to stop.
Boundaries. All right. So never quite thought of it this way, but that particular style of relationship is sort of an explicit version of an unhealthy codependent relationship or dependent relationship.
Exactly. Isn't that fascinating? And yet the BDSM community will absolutely advocate for their right to practice BDSM, right? So one of the things that I say quite often in my course is a phrase that goes, check your temples for termites, right? And what I mean by that is that my codependent issues hid in the sanctuary of sexual freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what happened then is that I was so invested, I call it like the Jurassic Park theory of beliefs, right? My scientists were so concerned about whether we could that we didn't stop to think about whether we should.
Right.
Right? Okay. I have the right, I have the freedom to engage in this relationship with these power dynamics and not be persecuted or shamed by outside people.
I'm hearing an epiphany coming.
At the same time that, that prevented me from looking at it with a critical eye either, because any kind of criticism sounded like kink shaming. Right. And I would have said, don't kink shame me. This is my sexual orientation. This is who I am. Right. And it felt that way for sure. So naturally, what I wasn't looking at was a whole ton of trauma that was underneath that was also playing out in this codependent relationship on loop. Right.
Right. Sure.
So I ended up getting into NLP actually because the man who I was in the relationship with was into things like NLP for mind control and seduction and pickup and things like that. And we were, I was also in that world.
So these are all iterations of a similar need within you to outsource your boundaries, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah. None of which I was aware of at the time. So that sort of leads us to what I teach today, which is that in 2016, 4 years ago, I had a spiritual awakening. And by that, I basically mean that I got to the logical conclusion of the end of my patterns. And I saw that I had reached the law of diminishing returns, right? I had reached that point where I am doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not working. And at some point, I have to admit to myself that I know nothing, Jon Snow, and I need to throw up my hands and admit that, I was getting out of a a sort of situationship at that time where it was like, wow, how did I let things get this bad? How did I let things get so bad that I am deeply emotionally entangled with a man who doesn't even notice that I've left until 6 weeks later?
Wow.
How was I so stuck in these, what I now understand to be people pleasing, right?
Right.
How was I so stuck in these patterns that I had learned that I really genuinely believed were going to work for me, and obviously didn't.
So,
And
yeah. So how do we come around to, so it sounds like today you have really two things going on in your life. You have your workshops and you have your work as an artist. So,
Yep.
yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what your life looks like now. Like, what are your daily practices? How do you care for yourself? You're a singer, among other things. So how do you care for your instrument? How do you keep your life healthy so that you're able to continue to produce and create?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I would say that the way that I maintain now
Mm-hmm.
is precisely by doing all the work between 2016 and now that I did to repattern, right? Doing all of that self-awareness work and excavating those patterns that I had that weren't working for me, right? The patterns, beliefs, and
Mm-hmm.
habits and unconscious trauma imprints and all that, and going and doing that work, whether it was doing the research, compiling, information that I learned in a ton of books, which nobody, when I was undergoing, when I was seeking traditional therapy or traditional psychiatric practices, or being
Mm-hmm.
medicated in my
Right.
20s, which no one had told me about. Everyone was like, oh, well, you must just be anxious or depressed, right? And no one was
Right.
looking into the fact that actually, I had no boundaries. I was in a
Mm-hmm.
codependent, abusive relationship. And the reason I had no boundaries was because of childhood trauma, right? I just hadn't put any of those things together.
Right. And so instead of addressing it from the perspective that you have agency to change your life, they just said, well, you have these problems, you have these symptoms, here's the medications that treat those symptoms.
Right, right. You have
Yeah. Yeah.
anxiety, you have depression, you might even have borderline personality disorder, right? Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
started on that one, right?
Mm.
Because
Okay.
that's like that's borderline personality disorder is something that describes a cluster of symptoms that is almost um, completely indistinguishable from PTSD, and especially from
Mm.
early complex PTSD. So it's like we
Mm.
slap labels on people and we give them these diagnoses. And so
Right.
if you're asking me about my current practices today, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel great. Are you kidding? I wake up in the day and I get to do work that I love. I like to think of our bodies as houses that we live in, that our spirits live in.
Right.
And if we are stockpiling all of these trauma responses and repressing all of the things within ourselves, all the experience and all of the emotions that we haven't had time to make space for, it's like living in a
Mm.
hoarder house.
Yeah, we don't have space to live.
Yeah,
We're all yeah, under piles of
exactly.
baggage, our baggage. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Fascinating.
process of repatterning is essentially going in and Marie Kondoing a hoarder house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
This is
when you
fascinating. You know
ask about,
what?
yeah.
Have you seen the tool that that we've built? Early Words is a version of morning pages that Julia Cameron describes in The Artist's Way, and that's
Oh,
sort of the
cool.
objective there too, is to write out 3 pages worth of just the mental noise in your head in the first thing in the morning, and I guess it's not unlike your Marie Kondo analogy. Um,
Yeah. So that's a daily practice that's like taking out the trash every day, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I do in
Go
the
ahead.
course is essentially is go through the whole house, right?
Hmm.
The daily practices that I do now would be about as effective as taking out the everyday trash in a hoarder house
Hmm.
if I
Hmm.
hadn't gone through and done my
Right.
repatterning, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the
But
pattern.
now,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, fascinating. So you not only are you teaching these workshops, but you're also a singer and you're writing books, and so you're finding time to write music and write books, and how does that look? Is that something you do on a schedule? Is that something you do as the spirit moves you? How does that work?
Yeah, I would say it's about 80% spirit and 20% schedule. And
Mm.
I decided at the start of 2016, right around that time when I had my awakening or repatterning, depending on how
Hmm.
spiritual of a perspective you want to look at it from.
Sure.
I decided at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm at the point in my life where I've let too much kind of fall by the wayside, in terms of that initial disappointment with preparing myself for a career in theater and then realizing that that was not going to manifest in the way that I had hoped. I was like, I've always loved
And your
singing.
values changed. and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and yeah, you went to the mountain, but the mountain was different when you got there.
precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So 2016 was the time in my life where I had to say, all right, given where I am right now, what do I want to do and how am I going to
Hmm.
exist as a creative in this world and what is important to me? Because I'd studied, acting, singing,
Hmm.
I'd taken some film classes and here I am in LA and I write books and what am I going to do?
Mm.
So I said, all right, I'm going to commit to my band. I'm going to commit to my identity as a singer because it
Hmm.
is the one creative realm where I know that I can have creative control. I can
Mm.
write my own songs. I can
Right.
produce my own videos. And there'll be ideas that will come from me. The problem with theater that I had was once I got there, the kind of theater that I wanted to do wasn't really existing anymore. And even if I went into film acting, I would be at the mercy of being cast by other people. And I'd be like, well,
Right.
are these
You're
roles I really
a
want
very
to do?
small cog in a giant machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like an actor could work for a long time and then get like like lead role on a cop show,
Hmm.
and be like, yes, I finally got my big job. But I'd look at that and be like, I don't want to be a cop, like
Right. Right.
that's not what I signed up for. So,
Yeah.
so I
This is
decided,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. I I wanted to drill down on this because it's interesting to look at if you were to pull out like a mega trend of the 21st century and you look at the younger artists coming up, they're getting rid of they're disintermediating, right? They're saying I'm going to stream on Twitch or I'm going to make YouTube shows or whatever it is that they're doing, but they have discovered that they can make their way in the world without being part of some giant machine other than the platforms that they're involved in,
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
fascinating, right? Because we did not have that opportunity 20 years ago, and it's a
Yeah,
new
that's
world.
another big thing that is really, really different, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's an evolution of opportunity.
Yeah, and I am still
Yeah.
just to be clear, I'm still not at all a self-produced artist. I write
Hmm.
my vocal parts, I write my melodies and lyrics, and I have an idea of how I want the song to feel. What the energetic signature of it should be, so I can
Do you
provide like
collaborate
some
with the
reference
band
songs.
on the rest, or how do you
I
work that out?
collaborate with producers. So I
Okay.
hire producers. Yeah, I hire
Hmm. Hmm.
producers to work with me, and I'll go to them and I'll be like, "This is the song that I wrote, and here's how I'm looking to bring it to life. And can you help me make this?" Basically, so I end up being
Hmm.
sort of like a creative director, and essentially having final say because I'm typically the one paying for the
Right.
session.
Yeah. Right.
Like
You're the
having
artist. Yeah.
right, exactly, having
Yeah.
that final say, but relying on the skill sets of other people because I never felt like an insider in any way in the music industry. I come from a musical theater background. I'm a trained
Hmm.
singer. But in terms of audio production, that was always, and even doing shows, like, you're not, I was
Somebody
never
else's
in a
job.
recording booth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Singing into a microphone for the first time was a whole new experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Right.
that was
Right.
a whole new, yeah, yeah, just not like learning to not sing for the stage was in itself, its own whole thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So my decision was basically, yeah, I'm going to commit to Arden and the Wolves as a project because if I can make Arden and the Wolves successful, I
Hmm.
can translate that into video. I can translate it into, potentially moving on into an acting career, because I
Hmm.
have that
Right.
skill set already. but I don't want to
Right.
try and be an actor. I want to try and be a brand where it's like, oh, we cast Taylor Swift in Cats, or we cast Dita Von Teese in this episode of CSI, or whatever that is.
Right. Because you have a certain amount of notoriety from your other work, and you're a sort of multi. One of our other guests called it multi hyphenate. You know,
Yeah.
I'm an actor, singer. You know,
That's
dancer.
precisely it. Yeah. And how do I make
exactly.
myself valuable beyond just looking like I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none? Right.
Right.
And for me, that answer was in music, because it involves writing, it involves performing, and it involves creation, you know, and performing on stage as well as performing in video. And it involves writing, you know, songwriting. So creating from that, you know, from that 0 point, right? Creating from that space of originality.
Yeah.
So I decided to commit to that. And then, so I committed to myself as an artist, and it became very clear that if I wanted my career to move as quickly as I wanted it to, then I was going to need to find a way to fund my music a lot better. Right.
Okay.
I was going to need to find a way to move out of, you know, teaching pickup here and there, having nightlife gigs, you know, working, like millennial, you know, diversified income, you know, modeling jobs here or there, and just regular hustling. I was like, this is not going to cut it anymore.
Right. Okay.
And
so did doors open?
Yeah.
Did you find a path?
Well, I did, but I made those doors.
So tell us about that. So how would you guide someone else to follow that precedent?
Yeah. So during the space between 2016 and 2018, where I had this awakening, where I realized all of these patterns, you know, and again, I do feel that this came from, in many ways, from the intention setting of me saying, you know, on the one hand, okay, here I am committing to myself as an artist. I better actually get my life together and do something. You know, I've been just this sort of, again, jack of all trades, master of none for years, and just kind of doing, a photo shoot here and talk about this there. And I have all these things that I can do, but no one thing that I'm really committing to. So it came out of that. And it also came out of that, again, I looked at where I was with my relationships, and coming out and saying, if I let things get this bad, then clearly I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So from those sort of two intentions of just me being like, I need to make some changes. I don't know what they are at this point, but I just know that I can't go about doing things the way that I've been doing them. So I moved forward.
So these two things are inextricable, it seems, and the way you've described them, doing the personal work of figuring out, you know, who you are and what life is about, and committing to yourself as an artist are inextricably bound. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I don't think I would have known to articulate that at the time, but I just knew.
Sure.
I was just like, all right, you know, here I am at this point in my life, and I'm not where I want to be. And I set an intention. I was like, all right, I want my partnership. I want a healthy relationship. And clearly what I'm doing, the things that I've learned are not actually getting me that relationship that I thought that they would.
Right.
And at the same time, you know, yes, that desire for stability, and that desire for self-actualization as an artist too, that desire to actually commit to myself.
Right.
And so those things sort of brought about a series of events that really mirrored to me. And this is a thing that I teach, and a thing that I greatly believe in, is that when we set an intention and we commit to it and we surrender, right? And we say, all right, universe, I know nothing. Teach me your ways. Even though we don't know what that is going to look like, we couldn't possibly know what that's going to look like when we start, because if we knew, we would be there already.
If we knew, we wouldn't need to. Yeah.
Right. But I really, truly believe, and I've seen evidence of this in my life, I've seen it in my clients' lives, that when we make that definite commitment, that things start to move and things start to happen that give us all the information that we need to move forward. And that's what happened for me. By about 2018, my EP came out. My first EP, I'd released a couple EPs before, but this was the first one that I really committed to and put a marketing plan behind, and really invested in myself and said, I'm going to take myself seriously as a musical artist. This is no longer just a vanity project. This is something I'm committed to. And at about that time, people started asking me, Arden, would you ever consider putting together a course on what you did for your healing and transformation journey?
It all comes
because
together.
We see,
Okay, I see.
Yeah, I know. I promised I was going somewhere with this the whole time, right?
Beautiful. Well,
thank you,
Arden. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. And
yeah, my pleasure. And just in conclusion, essentially by doing that work and creating the course, I basically created a life where I can support myself and I can support my music. And that I can do what I love and wake up to a life that I love and continue creating from that place of abundance where I can run my business in a way that supports my music, and I can create my music in a way that hopefully, promotes and markets my coaching, because it's the literal incarnation of showing me creating a life that I'm in love with and committing to my dreams. So I think we wrapped that up just finally in that last snippet. Yeah. We got through everything. And thank you again, because I know that there is certainly a lot in my history that is, like I said, there are many rabbit holes to go down. So thank you for holding space for all that.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. I feel that your particular journey really represents a very common shared dream of we want to live our best life, and for creative folks, that usually has to do with constructing that life consciously ourselves. So thank you so much for showing us one path and all the work that you've done. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
The 52 Sketches podcast is a product of 52 Sketches, makers of earlywords.io, daily, private, stream of consciousness writing to clear your mind and unlock your creativity.